When one is horrible, it means that there is nothing that is objectively good and progressive that will come out of such individual.
If you have been convicted of an offense before and you have been pardoned, and anybody is trying to bring that up against you and calling you a convict, you have the power to sue that person for defamation.
Justice must not only be done, but it must be seen by all to have been manifestly done.
Every citizen has a right and every citizen has an obligation.
That a plea of ultra-virus acquit or convict is very different from the plea of pardon.
Trespass is that act that interferes with the peaceful.
No matter how minute this,
right? No matter how minute.
Who comes to equity must come with clean hands. Hello out there, you are welcome to another fresh episode of the program Justifying Nigeria on ACNN television, reaching from Abuja. On today's episode, we are going to be looking at the legal view on compulsory vaccination. My name is Anozie Chinomso, your anchor. It is no longer a news that the deadly pandemic of coronavirus, popularly known as COVID-19, is ravaging and arbitrarily ending people's lives all over the world. In order to caution and curtail the widespread of the COVID-19, the World Health Organization recommended certain vaccines that may be safe and went ahead to encourage the global village to administer and inject them into their bodies. It is on this trajectory that the federal government imported first and second doses of AstraZeneca vaccine for the usage of Nigerians. However, it appears that majority of citizens of Nigeria willingly on their own refused to be vaccinated. It was based on this lack of compliance by some citizens of Nigeria to be vaccinated that the federal government some weeks ago ordered a compulsory vaccination to Nigerians, which include civil servants, public servants, government workers, and indeed all citizens of Nigeria. Is there legal perspective in all of this? Does this compulsory order from the federal government contravene any section or some sections of the fundamental human right enshrined in Chapter 4 of 1999 Constitution as amended? What is the way out in all of this? With me in the studio to legally justify these issues is Barrister Emmanuel Omole. He's a first-class graduate of Nigerian Law School 2017-18 session, head of chambers of NACO, the law partners here in Abuja, and grounded in prominent practice of corporate consultancy, litigation such as sports, entertainment, aviation, and criminal law. He's also passionate about social change and government accountability, and a member of the Unity Bar here in Abuja. You're welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
At some point, I thought you wanted to say he's grounded in vaccination.
I would not be wrong if I say so. Yes, because in fact that's the first question I'm putting on you. You are not a medical doctor, but I know you are. As of course, you lawyer believe that you people are wise and knowledgeable.
We just know a little of everything.
I hear you. What is vaccination? Just tell our viewers what is vaccination.
Okay, so I'm going to try and I'm going to simplify it as best as I can. First of all, the first thing we need to know about vaccination is that it's a preventive measure. It is different from treatment, it is different from cure. Because when someone unfortunately contracts COVID-19, you have to subject yourself to the treatment.
Okay.
You understand?
Okay.
But vaccination is more preventive for normal people who are at risk of contracting it.
Okay.
So
it happens before contracting.
Yes.
Okay.
So you take the vaccine. So how I can best explain it is like, in a society, there is the police force and there's the military. So the police force are usually present in everyday life. They are everywhere. Police stations are everywhere in town. So once there's any minor issue, anybody fighting on the street or anything, the police comes out to solve that issue and they go back in. But the military are always at the outskirts. It's only when there are specific issues that are beyond the normal bandwidth of the police capacity, then they bring in the military to neutralize it and then they go back. So ordinarily in a human body, you have an immune system. Now the immune system releases antibodies. So the antibodies are like your police. So if there's any small issue in your body, maybe your normal cough, sneezing, those little viruses that enter that are not of so much consequence, these police antibodies will come out and handle it and then go back, everything okay. But now when you contract a virus that seems to have overwhelmed the capacity of your normal immune system, which is why it is very necessary for people that have pre-existing conditions to be vaccinated, because your pre-existing condition has beaten down your immune system. So your police lacks capacity. They've taken their weapons, they've beaten them down. So you actually need the military to come and supplement them.
Which is this vaccination.
Exactly. So the vaccination is like introducing the military into your system. So they are always ready with their advanced weapons and they are on guard. So the moment the virus unfortunately comes in, they neutralize it.
In fact, you are explaining this both as a lawyer, as a medical expert. I mean, that's a very wonderful now.
Yeah.
Now, look, from the explanation, is understood what vaccination is all about.
Yeah.
But you know that a few weeks ago, the federal government, through Boss Mustafa, the Secretary of State government, and also I think chairman of COVID-19 Presidential Task Force, now made an order that all the whole, in fact, the whole citizens, especially the government workers and civil servants that have not been vaccinated, should. In fact, some states like Kaduna State have started in implementing it. Without that, you will stop working, you know, salary and all that. You are going to ask you two questions in one. Now, what is your take and legal view on that? Secondly, don't you think that that order from the federal government contravenes any section of the 1999 Constitution as amended under Fundamental Human Rights Chapter 4? What is your legal view in all of this?
Yeah, it's quite a controversial directive from the government. So for those who may not be aware of what the government did, they came out about a week ago and they gave a directive. And the directive was simple. As a public servant or civil servant, you should get vaccinated, or they give an alternative, which is a room for possible miscompliance. They gave a directive. They said, if you are not vaccinated, you must present, at the 1st of December, you must present a COVID-19 negative test to them. So those are your two options, as a public servant or civil servant.
Okay, every day
you come, that's the 1st of December. That's how they will start it.
Okay.
If you're coming to work on the 1st of December, is it that you come with your evidence of
vaccination,
taking the vaccine, or you come with your negative test that must have been conducted within the space of 72 hours. If you don't have any of those, then you won't be allowed to go into your office or work, and I'm sure it will have consequential implications.
Of course, in terms of salary, definitely.
And all that. So that was the directive. So it came with a whole lot of backlash. People came out, protesting it and condemning it and all that. And I see it as a very interesting directive.
I can see it in your face.
Yes, because ordinarily, people first cry out fundamental rights. If you look at it, there are several rights that this directive could possibly infringe and violate. One is the right to freedom of movement, saying that they will restrict you from entering into the office premises. So you can't enter into any government office, especially your own. So they are restricting the freedom of movement.
So it's an infringement somehow.
So that's the first one. Yeah.
First one.
Another one is the right to liberty, stating that they are going to basically forcing you to go against your personal liberty and the exercise of your personal liberty, mandating you to vaccinate. So people can say it has that possibility of infringing on your right to personal liberty.
All these rights are contained in Chapter 4 of the 19th Constitution.
And then people can even go further and even state that it infringes on your dignity of human person.
But is that correct in law?
Because vaccination is said, one thing that scares people is that it's said to have side effects. So there have been reports of possible medical side effects of it. So that alone has scared people from taking it. So if you now want to force someone to take it, he might say that you are torturing him or subjecting him to inhumane treatment.
Okay, based on that.
So that is another possible law that they can.
Before you continue, Barrister, you agree with me that this topic is a very interesting topic.
It is.
So there is no need to rush it.
Yeah.
We'll continue from here. We'll come back for break.
No
Please,
problem. I
our
look
viewers,
forward
do
to
join
that.
us again. Hi, you're welcome to The Speaker. The Speaker is a program by which we treat some topical issues happening in the polity and in the nation. On today's episode or segment, we'll be looking at fulfilling Nigeria or frustrating Nigeria. My name is Anozie Chinomso. The word fulfillment is an act of having a feeling of satisfaction in achieving your desired goal. When fulfillment is present, accomplishment, realization, completion, and success are totally inevitable. In fact, I dare say that a nation that is fulfilled is a nation that is both satisfied and justified. On the other hand, the word frustration is full of disappointment, annoyance, thwarting, and circumventing. When a nation is frustrated, there is always a deceit, cheating, corruption, and destruction of lives and properties. With the kind of fearful and inconceivable things happening in Nigeria on a daily basis, I'm moved to ask on whether we are living on a fulfilled Nigeria or a frustrated Nigeria. In a situation where the level of insecurity seems to overpower the strength of government, is a clear picture of an unfulfilled Nigeria. In a situation where the speed of government is both epileptic and unnecessarily slow to pronounce bandits and Boko Haram a terrorist group, even when the Senate have directed the executive to do so, is another example of a frustrated Nigeria. Nigeria Air Force denying paying 20 million naira to bandits on exchange for anti-graft weapon to protect President Muhammad Buhari showcases the fact we are living in a frustrated Nigeria. This is because in a frustrated Nigeria, everybody is confused. The leaders are confused, the led are confused, the government is confused, the electorates are confused, confusion up, confusion down, confusion left, confusion right, confusion at the front, confusion at the back, confusion everywhere. The federal government budgeting a whooping and electrifying sum of 104 billion naira for the purchase and maintenance of generators in 2022 budget is not only disheartening, but also another evidence to showcase that we are living in a frustrated Nigeria. Where Federal Inland Revenue Service, FIRS, deny budgeting 2.3 billion for uniforms alone, when there is evidence that establishes that fact, is also an example of frustrating Nigeria. Deployment of 35,000 security agents to Anambra State just because of gubernatorial election where no sufficient troops have been deployed to these states of insurgency and places where people are being killed on a daily basis is a clearer pointer to the fact that we are living in a frustrated Nigeria. How can it be that candidates of various parties for governorship election in Anambra State are all campaigning in Asaba, Lagos, and other cities in Nigeria because of insecurity? This shows you a Nigeria that her political class is not only confused and irrational, but also frustrated in their thoughts. How can it be that it is few weeks to the governorship election in Anambra State that Senator Ifeanyi Ubah is fighting a suit against DSS to release Nnamdi Kanu just because he's one of the contestants vying for the seat of governor in the forthcoming election? How can it be that the Minister of Information, Lai Mohammed, told the world in a press conference that bandits are simple criminals who believe in Nigerians' unity? What a shame. I don't know whether to laugh or cry. A man that is uttering such abomination through his mouth cannot be referred to as honorable minister, but rather a horrible minister. All this can only happen in a frustrated Nigeria. Is it not a disgraceful thing and a matter of great concern The Nigeria of today still knows pain. Nigeria of today still knows hunger. Nigeria of today still knows hardship. Nigeria of today derives joy in swimming in the ocean of innocent blood. Nigeria of today have succeeded in making lies and greed her creed. Nigeria of today have ceased to be the warriors of truth and justice, but warriors of corruption and murder. Every day I weep for Nigeria, but I do not stop at weeping, but I go further in praying for her, hoping that one day Nigeria shall rise from her slumber and shackles of debris and become a great nation again. But these children of darkness will not allow the prayer to come to pass. In all of this, I will not give up. I will continue to contribute my quota towards the better growth and sustainability of Nigeria. What about you? In order to justify Nigeria, I therefore speak. Until all of us contribute our quota in rebuilding Nigeria, become sincere and absolute patriotic citizens, and begin to think differently on how to make Nigeria better through determination and undivided attention, become more focused and articulated in order to achieve our collective goal of a fulfilled Nigeria, we shall continue to live in a frustrated Nigeria instead of a fulfilled Nigeria. My name is Anojechi Nomso. I just want to speak. Glad to know that you are still there, my beautiful viewers, and we are still here in the studio with Barrister Omole Emmanuel. Barrister, before we went on break, you are trying to tell us how interested the directives have been, telling us what vaccination is all about. Now, please pick it up from there, why you say that all these whole things are, because you are trying to talk about the issue of people thinking that is infringing on their dignity of human persons.
Exactly.
Please pick it up from there.
So we've listed so far 3 different aspects.
Aspects,
or
exactly.
components.
Please, you can just
rights.
reaffirm it again.
The right to personal liberty.
That's right.
The freedom of movement. And the right to dignity of human persons.
That's right.
So the idea behind these rights is that they are, in their very nature, not absolute. So what we want to explore is that if they come out and say that the federal government is infringing on this right, then is there an understanding of this right that we can come to where we tell those people that this issue we are dealing with may fall under certain exceptions? So looking at, I would like us to take it one by one. Now looking
so you're saying that for every general rule there must be an exception. Okay, let's hear you now.
The first is, let's take right to personal liberty. Now if you check section 35 of the Constitution that provides for right to personal liberty, it lists a whole lot of exceptions when you are sentenced to prison, when there's a riot and insurrection. It also mentions something very interesting. It says that when there is a diseased or infected person, restricting his movement for his own safety, his treatment and care, and for the safety of others.
That's exception now.
That's part I like, yes. So,
yes.
But the tricky part is that if someone is infected by the virus, yes, your rights should be breached because you should be quarantined and you should be kept away from infecting other people for the safety of the population. But now the question is, what happens when people are not infected yet, but you want to take preventive measures? Now, that's an interesting legal aspect. You're taking of a preventive measure. Does it fall under the fact that you are restricting the movement of these people for the safety of the population, for the safety of public health? For public health and safety. So that's the interesting aspect, because the Constitution is a bit unclear on that. The Constitution says an infected person, yes, you can breach his right to freedom of movement. But it doesn't say that for a healthy person that you are trying to prevent from becoming an infectious person and then spreading the infection around. Same thing applies to freedom of movement. Freedom of movement, there's also an exception to it in Section 45. Section 45 says you can breach the freedom of movement of a person if it has to do with public health or public safety. So that is another ground to infringe on the movement of certain persons because of public health and public safety. And you understand that the way COVID-19 plays as a pandemic, it has brought a unique situation on ground where you can't afford to be reactive. You have to be proactive. You understand? So the question now is, can you proactively protect the population by infringing on people's rights when they don't fall under those exceptions? So that is the murky waters the federal government has to navigate at this point. Another angle that people don't look at is that because the federal government has restricted this to federal employees, civil servants and public servants,
and of course government workers.
And government workers generally. So if you're a federal government worker, you are either a civil servant or a public servant. It now brings a whole labor issue to bear. Because the government didn't say all the citizens. The government said, if you are working for us, this applies to you. It now becomes a labor issue that is open for interpretation in the National Industrial Court as to what is the current terms of service. And does the current terms of service provide for such mandatory measures? Or is it you imposing a onerous term of service against your employees, which will now be a breach of the contract of employment between the federal government and its employees? You understand?
Yes.
So it's a very, very tricky measure. What I would ordinarily have advised the federal government to do was to try a persuasive approach to its employees. Try to make them understand why this is necessary and why you acting as a conduit, because that's the problem. You may not end up dying from catching COVID-19, but you can be a conduit. The person that gave it to you may die. You catch it, pass it to another person who may also die. But because you survived, you are thanking God, you are happy, praying in church, giving thanksgiving, but you have served as a conduit that killed 2 people.
Exactly.
You understand? So that's the tricky aspect. So when people start to understand how their very presence alone is a problem, because of this conduit analogy, then people will start coming to that understanding why they need to be vaccinated. But the moment you make it mandatory, it becomes a legal contest. Once you have made it compulsory, it now enters into the realm of a legal contest, where people will stand their ground and say, I have my rights, you can't breach it.
And that's the sense of this discussion.
And that is exactly what even advanced countries like the US are suffering.
That's right.
Because a lot of governors have tried to do it, and then the moment you make it mandatory, it's like the people have a mindset that is akin to protesting against government directives. So the moment you say you must vaccinate, everybody just came out and said, no, we are not vaccinating, we are not doing that. And then another thing is, let me just drift off point a bit, because I've noticed that there has been a lax in enforcing COVID-19 rules and regulations and protocols, because that is also that is something that could have been mandatory without breaching any fundamental rights. If government offices and government institutions enforce the washing of hands, using of face masks, using of hand sanitizers, and all that, and the way you sneeze, and all the protocols that have been laid out.
Not being in crowded places and all that.
Try and avoid crowded places and all that, because this is airborne, it's easily contagious. So if we would continue enforcing it, then it would also contribute to the reduction in COVID-19 cases. And then you can even manage a population that doesn't want to get vaccinated. At the very least, they are not dying. So while you are fighting them in court, whether it is a breach or it's not a breach, at least they are still alive. So I think the federal government needs to pour in more resources and put in more commitment while they are trying to get people to get vaccinated. At the same time, try and enforce COVID-19, because those protocols are still enforced, but they are not being enforced. That's the
come again.
issue.
Those protocols are
enforced, but they are not being enforced.
Thank you very much. We've heard it there. Now, thank you very much for that elaborate explanation.
Yes,
now, but you agree with me that this COVID-19 vaccination and all that, we should be vaccinated. You agree with me that oftentimes people that are vaccinated also dies of it. Now, and does it necessarily make any human sense? Taking the case study of the former Secretary of United States, that's United States Secretary of State's
Yeah.
Colin Powell that just died of COVID-19.
Yeah.
What's your take on that? There was the sense of all about this, get vaccinated, when at the end of the day you will still die. So what's your own human thinking of in that aspect? Using this Colin Powell case now as a case study.
It's a very it's a very interesting, because this is one of the arguments for people that they call them in the US anti-vaxxers. They say that at the end of the day you will still die. So what is the point taking it? But the scientific research and the data is tangible proof. What they are saying is philosophical at best. So the data that has been released is saying that the vaccines are 85 to 90% effective. So there's always a room for marginal error where certain people might end up dying, especially people that may have pre-existing conditions. But generally it is 85 to 90% effective. Now something is 85 to 90% effective because 10% died. You are saying nobody should take it. Everybody should just be free for all. And another beautiful thing about people against vaccination is that they never have a solution. There's never a solution. There's just don't get vaccinated. But they never give you a solution. They never give you an answer to the COVID-19 pandemic. They never give you any form of succor. They just say don't get vaccinated. So what's the next plan? What's the next plan? That's the thing.
Thank you very much. Now we have just a few minutes to end the program.
Yeah.
What is your advice to our viewers, to the federal government and entire citizens on this issue of vaccination?
My advice to viewers is you may have your reasons, personal, spiritual reasons or whatever, but the case of this COVID-19 pandemic is the case of your right to swing an arm stops where the nose of the other man begins. So the moment you are in a position where you will get to interact with people, where you would get to go around, see people, talk to people, and basically just interact with people. When you found yourself in that position, then you ask yourself, if I decide because of some spiritual or religious belief not to get vaccinated, what happens when I go outside and I become a conduit, a source of transmission and spreading this thing to people? At the end of the day, you might not know. There are people that have gone to their houses and given their aged parents COVID-19 unknowingly, and then they die. And then you are feeling guilty that you contributed to the killing of your parents. That's the kind of situation you're putting yourself in, because it's not a normal situation, it's not a usual situation. So before you say you will not get vaccinated because of your spiritual beliefs, now the question is, how cautious are you not to be a conduit? Because your spiritual beliefs will not rescue you if you are on record as having contributed to the death of this Mr. A, B, and C around you because you are not getting yourself vaccinated. So I'm not going to force you to get vaccinated. There's the science to it, there's the statistics to it, and there's wisdom to it. But if you decide not to, you know that there is a 200% responsibility that has now come upon you not to expose yourself, always wear your face mask, always sanitize, and not to be a conduit to spread this thing to other people. That would be my advice.
There is always two ways to all these things, not compulsorily enforcing you by him for you to take the vaccination, but you must at all times obey the COVID-19 protocols. We want to appreciate you, sir,
Thank you
for
so
coming.
much.
And next time we call you, please oblige us to come. Thank you very much for this
Only if there's
insight.
refreshment.
Definitely, definitely. It is the duty of the governments to ensure the healthy living of our citizens. I think in all fairness, the federal government have tried in providing these vaccines, and it is both equitable and reasonable that Nigerians should take advantage of it. Looking at the issue at hand, it tends to contravene some sections in Chapter 4 of the Constitution that borders on the fundamental human rights of citizens. But also remember that the beauty of law is that for every general rule, there's an exception. And where someone's right stops, that's where someone else's rights begin. It is therefore the humble and sincere advice of Justify Nigeria and the entire crew that all citizens should endeavor, not by compulsion anyway, to get vaccinated so that together we can achieve the aim of controlling and eradicating this dreaded disease and pandemic at the long run. I hope you have been vaccinated. If not, do get vaccinated. This is where we draw the curtain on today's episode of Justify Nigeria. Join us same time, same station on another fresh episode of the program. Until then, this is Anoze Chinam. So wishing you the very best and bye for now. When one is horrible, it means that there is nothing that is objectively good and progressive that will come out of such individual.
If you have been convicted of an offense before and you have been pardoned, and anybody is trying to bring that up against you and calling you a convict, you have the power to sue that person for defamation.
Justice must not only be done, but it must be seen by all to have been manifestly done.